Stephen Chin, and I have the privilege of serving as the board chair for the Nonprofit Institute's Advisory Board. It's been a thrill for all of us to see you here today. You know, the mission of the Nonprofit Institute is to make sure that we are providing the proper data, research, and learning to help the sector improve. And all of you being here today is a testament to that success, but really, I think that we're the ones that are acknowledging your graciousness by being here and taking of yourself to learn and to get better. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for staying after lunch. So I wanted to welcome you all to the Kaleidoscope Awards. Now, some of you may be familiar with this award. It's something that we have been giving for 15 plus years. This is our 16th Kaleidoscope Award. Earlier this morning, you heard from Emily Young, who was telling you about the Libby Award. And so there are two different awards that are passed out every year. One in the fall at the State of Nonprofits, and that's the Libby Award. And this year we gave that to Jason Paggio for the Asian Business Association. And then in the winter, we provide the Kaleidoscope Award winners. And the Kaleidoscope Award is something that's given out for organizations who are demonstrating good governance. So these awards are meant to promote and inspire leadership, and essentially we want to give you an insight into what's working for some others and how you might be able to take the best back home and see how you could try some of this within your own organization. So in this session, we're going to be highlighting good examples of good governance, and we have 3 award winners. Now, one thing that I wanted to clarify, because I asked the question myself, why is it called Kaleidoscope? And Emily described it to me this way. Like a kaleidoscope, good governance is very dynamic. That means that there's no set template. You know, we heard this morning from the opening presentation about different models for governance and the ways to maybe break that apart and reassemble it in the way that would be suitable for your needs. So in that same way, when we meet with these organizations, we're not passing judgment on what they're doing. We're looking at how well they've been able to succeed with their current process. And it's been a thrill. I have the pleasure of being a part of a committee that examines the work that they do, and then we come to agreement on the 3 different winners. So we're excited to announce that there are 3 of them, and what we're going to do today is break apart this session into 15 to 20 minute sessions so that you can actually learn from each of them, because we selected each of them for slightly different reasons. All right, so to get us started, I'm going to announce the very first winner, and I'm so excited about this. So without further ado, our very first award is for community-centered leadership, and the award winner is Healing Wave Aquatics. And actually, I had the pleasure of getting to know Healing Wave Aquatics from a while back. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you remember. It was the Nonprofit Institute who referred Elizabeth to me, and that's how we met each other. That was back in 2018. So this award recognizes the efforts of Healing Wave Aquatics to build a board that is strongly connected to the military communities it serves. Healing Wave Aquatics has led with intention in recruiting board members, including former clients, who are highly knowledgeable of their constituents. This has enabled them to develop and enact their strategic plan, resulting in a successful capital campaign. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And that, in turn, has enabled them to deliver on their mission with greater impact to providing aquatic bodywork therapies for military veterans, active duty personnel, and caregivers living with the impacts of post-traumatic stress. So I'd just like to ask the representatives from Healing Wave Aquatics to come up to the stage, please. Congratulations. Okay, sorry, we got to do the picture thing. Well, first of all, congratulations to the three of you. I really appreciate you being here. And we have a series of questions that we have established and designed so that we can get to know each other a little bit. And so I'll go ahead and kick it off, but the first thing I wanted to do was give each of you a chance to introduce yourselves to the audience. You want to use the microphone here?
Well, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Feaster. I am a San Diego native, born and raised in Chula Vista. Ended up going to San Diego State, getting a bachelor's there before going to law school in San Diego. And I'm an attorney and blessed to serve on this wonderful organization.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Elizabeth Berg. I'm also a San Diego native. I have had the pleasure of serving this community in the nonprofit industry for the past 25 years, and grateful for the learning I've had even here at this institution to help serve our community through a nonprofit leadership.
Hi, I'm Nick, and I am not a San Diego native. I am a transplant from the tropical state of New Jersey, so thank you for welcoming me. I am the newly appointed board president and very happy up here. I am a former Army military officer. I'll go into that a little bit later, but very happy to be a part of this veteran-centric nonprofit for the San Diego community. Good to be here.
Thank you all. And Nick, before we get started, is it northern New Jersey or southern New Jersey?
So Friday the 13th was filmed in my hometown, Camp Crystal Lake, so that's our only claim to fame. That was a horrible movie, other than for Kevin Bacon, so there you go.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. All right. Well, as I said, we have a few questions we're going to ask our audience. One thing I wanted to remind everyone here, our panelists, one thing I wanted to remind our audience is that if you're interested in learning more from each of the three award winners that you're going to hear from today, they will be staying afterwards, and I think we have a designated space right outside the auditorium. So please feel free to hang out, and I know that they would welcome your questions because we're only going to have time to get to some of the things in our 15 minutes together with each of these groups. All right, so Andrew, Let's start with you. Your organization started the strategic planning process, I can't believe this, in the midst of the pandemic, developing a document that was a living document by the end of 2020. So talk to us about, during the pandemic, we all are familiar with that experience and how disconnected it could be. How did you do it, and what were some of the key components of the plan that have inspired your work moving forward?
I think initially, I think our plans for a strategic plan actually started in 2019. Like everyone, we were looking forward to the new decade, the new year. We were excited to grow our board as well as potentially grow our business plan. But in order to do that, we wanted to be very strategic and intentional, always circling back to what is our mission, what is our purpose. And so our board decided then to reach out to an outside consulting group. And she really led the effort of developing this, I think I described it as a compass, right? In everything, whatever obstacles or objectives and anything that we wanted to achieve, is it pointing towards circling back to our mission and our goals? And one of the important things I think that highlighted, even though I think our first session actually started January, February of 2020, so right before the craziness began. One of the important things that happened, though, was our consultant reached out to our stakeholders. We're talking about our donors, we're talking about staff members, we're talking about volunteers. Reaching out to them about our name change, reaching out to them about getting an own facility, reaching out about our goals and what they would like to see out of this organization that they have given to, volunteered for, and I think that was very important. And even to this day, we have a living document, really, essentially, that guides our movements. And everything that we would like to do, it all circles back to, does it serve our purpose? Does it serve our mission? And I think that's what we have this living document for.
Thank you. And I know from the document that one of the priorities was to better meet the needs of your clients by establishing one of the nation's first ever facilities. So I'd just like to ask you, Elizabeth, if you can talk a little bit about that need and what sort of precipitated really a full-blown capital campaign.
Sure, thanks, Stephen. So, and the organization has been a wonderful organization from day one, serving veterans with post-traumatic stress, and through some fantastic partnerships with homeowners who had developed aquatic therapy pools in their backyards that were designed for this kind of work of doing aquatic therapy. In 2019, the board was realizing that there were certain gaps in being able to fully implement the program, and that goes from a lot of ways of being able to operationalize what we're doing, to having research, having the controls of being able to develop the program further, that we're limited by having a number of satellite places where our program is taking place. So having everything under one roof would help, was a key essential in helping the organization grow.
And I was going to say, it has a very happy ending. Tell us about the opening.
Yeah, so the process culminated this past November with our grand opening on Veterans Day. Thank you. It was basically a 2-year process between finding a space that would even allow us to build 2 therapy pools. And there's plenty of spaces for rent out there, but once they found out we wanted to dig 2 pools, they shook their heads. So finding a space that was also easy access, that was in a location that felt quiet when you arrived, that was easy to enter. All of these were pieces that we knew would be important for our client base already dealing with trauma and anxiety. Even before they arrived, we wanted the process to be beginning even before they came to our door. But then I will say then from starting construction in 2020, and you all heard about shipment delays and procurements, and then permitting, which San Diego had a very antiquated system. You still going to what had been behind the desk to get your permits. Everything was delayed, setting us on what had originally been, I think, a 4-month timeline to becoming about a 1.5 years.
Yeah, there's nobody from the permitting office here.
And then through that, the fundraising too, that would change as we had new discoveries along the way that led to further costs. Changing what had originally been an $850,000 budget to do a tenant renovation, and that was brought up to $1 million. So our $1 million campaign, which was meant to cover a little bit of our startup, ended up needing to be pushed to a $1.2 million campaign.
Yeah, I was going to say, so how, Nick, in terms of the budget and changes, how did that affect your efforts along the way, and as well as the delays, of course?
Made us really happy. So look, I can't imagine that there's anybody in this room that hasn't experienced some sort of frustration with construction or delays, or even just getting your kids on the school bus, right? So just to very quickly, and we will answer questions after this, but this was a big thing for us in our strategic campaign, was to build this flagship facility, was to realize this first-in-the-nation capacity and capability. But let me just read you a couple of various challenges: the city and county environmental permits, contractor selection, architect, general contractor, second general contractor, pool general contractor, fencing, specialty windows, cost increases from outside the published guidance, the delay due to non-communication between those general contractors, change orders from those general contractors, utility increases, inspections, working on commercial property manager for approval, never happened, and unforeseen expenditures increases, and then which all kind of resulted in a breach of our timeline. How did we overcome that? Well, it really ties back into that very cliche but very important and necessary aspect of the relationship building with those stakeholders. And we were so thankful that we had done that in the beginning, because when it came to crunch time and we had to up the ante and double down and say we needed to shake that tree for that Dr. Evil $1 million, they were there. Not only were they there, they were shaking other people's trees because they were already so invested in it and they couldn't see it fail. It was at that point too big to fail. So that's where it was all hands on deck.
Tell us a little bit about how you activated the board, and I remind everyone here how large your board is, and how you activated the board in order to support some of the needs in that capital campaign.
Right, if I could ask my board to stand up. Come on, guys, we're out of time. There you go. Okay. So you're dismissed. We're a strong but mighty board. We're a board of 7, and the last gentleman to sit down there, Dave Sumter, his name was on the prompter there. He was the president for the 2 years, just relinquished that title to me. So all of this hard work is due to his efforts with the rest of the board and the executive director. So it is small, but there are pros and cons of that. I'm sure there are plenty of you out there that have small boards. I liked the size of our board because we were able to be agile. Yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of horsepower. We had people on multiple committees, but we were able to be agile and have more meetings and spur of the moment meetings and ad hoc meetings, and be able to realize that you weren't able to hide behind anybody. There was accountability every step of the way.
And in terms of the recruitment, you have folks that are on your board who really understand the community. So can you tell us about your recruitment process, how you go about that, and really, were there any challenges in terms of recruiting from within the community as well?
So first of all, we'll be taking applications after this if you'd like to join our board. Recruitment is a tough thing, right? It really is. I was a client back in 2018 when I got medically retired from the Army, and I liked what we did. I liked the mission. I was asked to volunteer. I did. I came back and I was asked to join the board, and I did. I'm very happy that I did. I got my first civilian job, moved up to the Bay Area. I walked away for a little bit and came back down. When I came back, the board was incredibly diverse, not only just from the walks of life. So we have people that can provide financial acumen and business, therapeutic lines of understanding, right? So we were very proud that we were able to draw from all those different walks of life.
And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit only because in the interest of time, I want to make sure we get to some of the other questions here. The past few years, we just talked about being very challenging, and many leaders have reported just challenges of burnout and really an ever-increasing demand for service, and as well as changes in cost, et cetera. Can you share, I was going to ask Elizabeth, can you share how the board actually approached those types of challenges during this time for you?
Thank you. I have a really key memory of being in our March board meeting last year in 2022. We were supposed to be finished at that time, and we weren't. We actually, not only we were not done, we were held up significantly by our contractor who said we won't finish. We will not finish your job. And they had dreamed up another $30,000 that we needed to pay out of the sky to finish the job. And I didn't know where the money was going to come from because we had already completed what our initial fundraising goal was going to be. And I didn't know how we were going to do this anymore. It really felt like that effort that you've completed your marathon and then someone tells you to go run a 10K and you're tired and hungry and you're crawling on the floor. And I told the board, I said, I need a break. I don't know how else to explain it. I have something in the works in June, and one of my board members immediately said, take as long as you need, Elizabeth. And it was just those words, and it just was such a nice settling feeling that I could take a break I needed.
Thank you for sharing that. And I would ask both Andrew and Nick, can you talk a little bit about the importance and how you view that process of supporting your executive leadership?
I think looking back at that time, 2019, we were practicing, our programs were working out of private pools. COVID happened, and I believe we lost half of them. And so Elizabeth was going around looking at different options, whether it's YMCA, other organizations trying to find that. So in the midst of all of that, then we have our strategic plan and now our capital campaign, in addition to what Nick said and the litany of expenses and change orders, a lot was on Elizabeth's plate. And going through all of that to then finding a facility and going through obstacle after obstacle, a marathon and then a 10K. For me, when I heard Elizabeth needing a vacation, that was the easy answer. I was like, we need to give her whatever she wants, because what we have asked of her was extraordinary. Where we have gone from 2019 to today, it's been a lot. And so if she needs an extra week, an extra 2 weeks, yes, that was an easy decision, at least for me.
So economy of force, the military term we use when you do more with little. And that's what we expected very deliberately of our executive director. She came in for development and fundraising. She did not have in her job description, you will build a flagship facility. But we put it in pencil on the bottom. And she rolled with it. She rolled with it. And in order to do that, we just couldn't push it all on her. It was incumbent of us to be a working board, an engaged board, a boots-on-the-ground board that were there every step of the way, that were going to be present, and not only present in the moment, but be able to be engaged and participative in that process by forming committees and helping her out with the day-to-day. Pretty much, I think she should, probably from the County of San Diego, get some sort of certificate for project management, but we're looking into that for her, because that and her contractor's license.
Okay, well, I know we're going to run out of time, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe provide us with a final reflection or learning, and maybe I just ask each of you to comment briefly on that. Remember, we're in a room here with fellow nonprofit leaders who are all really striving to do the best to improve our communities. So what words of wisdom would you share with them? And I've been following your journey, as you know, and I still am in disbelief at how you accelerated this process. So congratulations to you. But let's start with your final reflection.
I think I joined the board, I believe it was late 2018, maybe early 2019. And if you ask my coworkers, they've told me multiple times, I have a soft spot for veterans. My father was a Navy veteran. My grandfather was in the Army. My wife's father was is a 30-year Marine retired, and her grandfather is in the Navy, I believe. But veterans are surrounded both on both sides. And I knew I've always had a passion, a call for service, of serving and helping veterans. Luckily, unsurprisingly, I wasn't actually aware my clients actually participate in this program. I knew separate and independently that I wanted to help out veterans on my own time. But then when I get into the program, I realized that a lot of my clients that I represent actually end up participating in our program. And that fueled me back then when I wanted to join the board, and it fuels me today. I'm excited for our flagship program, our flagship facility, expanding our base to include more than just veterans, but the desire and my passion for helping veterans still is alive today.
My two words are passion and purpose. And you heard Andrew just talk about his passion. And I know the passion exists in all of you as well, and your sense of purpose. And I truly believe that those two items are what gelled the board to keep pushing the board and staff forward on this very audacious project.
Yeah. Risk. Can't have success without risk. Risk has to be mitigated, and it needs people to be on top of it. That was one lesson that I learned over the last 18 months. And number two is the number 2 bullet there. So tying back to your community, 8% of 3.3 million people in San Diego County is roughly 264,000. We have done almost 1,000 clients that we've serviced over our tenure. So you do the math, we've got a long way to go. We invite all of you to our facility in Rose Canyon, and our doors are open to you. I'd love to take you on a tour and give you a float if you like one.
And don't forget, we're recruiting for board members, right? Okay. So I just wanted to say, Andrew Feaster, Elizabeth Berg, and Nick Seidel, thank you very much for sharing your story, and congratulations.
Thank you.
you so much. Wasn't that thrilling to hear about their story? I know it's not enough time. We're gonna try to make sure that we've got that time at the back end of this, but we certainly want to make sure we can share as many examples of success as we can. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next facilitator. His resume is so long, I have to write out some names. So Micah Parzen, some of you may know this name, is a nonprofit leader, an attorney, an anthropologist, and an agent of transformational change. And since 2010, Micah has served as the CEO of the Museum of Us. I'm very proud to welcome him to the stage to introduce our next Kaleidoscope Award winner, Micah Parzen.
Hey, Stephen. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So nice to be with you all. Really a pleasure to be here and to be able to be in person. And I have the distinct honor of being able to announce the next Kaleidoscope Award, and that goes to Episcopal Community Services. This Kaleidoscope Award recognizes the efforts of Episcopal Community Services to lead with purpose by building a board that is strongly connected to and reflective of the communities that it serves. Episcopal Community Services has led with intention in recruiting board members, including former clients, who truly know their constituents. ECS has developed and implemented a strategic plan that has not only expanded existing programming, but also added new programs addressing critical issues in our community, such as children's mental health, substance-related disorders, and the homeless crisis in our community. Please join me in welcoming ECS representatives to the stage. We'll do the photo, and then we'll get down to some discussion. Okay, welcome folks. It's really good to have you here. I speak on behalf of our entire review committee in saying that it was such a pleasure to read your materials along with so many others who submitted, and we were just so impressed with the work that you folks have been doing in the community over the years. So first off, congratulations. Really happy to have a conversation with you today. If we could just start where maybe you could introduce yourself, your role in the organization, and maybe how long you've been with Episcopal Community Services as well.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Fitzsimons. I'm coming up on my second year as CEO of ECS. Micah, thank you for leading this conversation. I admire the work that you and your board are doing at Museum of Us. Thank you so much to the Nonprofit Institute for this great honor. I'm thrilled to have this recognition on our just incredible group of volunteer leadership that we have. And we have a bunch of them here in the room along with our leadership team. And that's a really special partnership that we have at ECS. And I'd love to invite our former and current board members and leadership team to stand up, please. Just so we can recognize you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monica Everett Haynes, and this is my second year serving on the board. In my day-to-day, I serve as the Associate Vice President and Chief Communications Officer at San Diego State University. And I also would like to extend a tremendous amount of gratitude. Looking at those of us who are in the running to be honored and appreciated, and those of us who are selected, it is a tremendous honor to be among them. So thank you so much for the recognition. Very happy to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for having us. We look forward to speaking with everyone today during this panel as well as afterward. My name is Hezekiah Herrera. I always say I'm a father first. I'm a special education teacher for children with extensive support needs. In fact, I'm going to be going back to school after this. But nevertheless, I'm also a board member, and it is my first year. So I am one of those clients to board members. A great example of that opportunity extended to me and to help support this organization. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, folks, for all the work you're doing in the community. There were so many intriguing aspects of your submission to the Kaleidoscope Award, and one of the things that was particularly compelling to the review committee members was that you folks engaged in a pivotal sort of shift in recent years. And that was from a board member, a membership board, which is essentially elected by members of the community who are members of the organization, to what's called a self-sustaining board, where the board actually nominates and elects new board members. Could you talk a little bit about that process for you folks? It seems like it sort of was pivotal in the beginning of your journey over the last few years to some really significant changes in terms of the impact you're making.
You captured it really well, Micah. It was really a foundational piece for us for the work that we wanted to do that needed to come after. And so when I arrived at ECS in April of 2021, I found this fantastic board, really smart and really engaged and passionate people. And I also found this kind of curious governance structure that I hadn't encountered before, and it's a membership organization. And that meant that that any time that the organization wanted to bring on new board members or make any kind of big change in its bylaws or the way that it was operating or doing business, it needed the support, it needed the approval of its members. And the members were defined as anyone who had supported ECS in the past year. So we had to get together at least 50 members to vote on new board members, for example, and this would happen once a year at our annual meeting. So it was kind of like, the cat in the plastic box that we saw on the slide this morning. It's like, it's fine, it's working. I mean, the organization was doing well, but it was limiting. And the board, I think, having gone through the pandemic, was like, there's a lot of opportunity for us to do more, to make some changes to our board, but we have this sort of limiting structure. And so that was the first thing that we wanted to do, to be able to nimbly address the needs of the community, because so much had shifted over the course of the pandemic. And so our board president, Jessica Ripper, who really understands the culture of our ECS community and the history of the organization, really laid out a very thoughtful plan of how to get this done and really build support for this transition to a self-perpetuating board. And by the time we called together all the members, we had 75 people on a Zoom, and it was a unanimous decision to move to a self-perpetuating board. So that was a great lesson in really putting the time and the effort and the thoughtfulness into a process at the beginning, because it turned out so well. And it really set the stage for what we wanted to do next, which was a strategic plan and a rebranding, and we wanted to do some recruitment on our board.
Wonderful, and we'll get a chance to talk about your strategic plan in a bit. Just curious, was there something about what was going on during COVID that sort of led you to make that shift to a self-sustaining board at that time?
Would you like to address that, LaMonica, or you want?
I'll take part of it, yeah. So very much appreciate that question. And if we think about a lot of what we're hearing during the session, we keep hearing about having a mission-driven, purpose-driven philosophy, way of being. And what we've realized is, at the same time we were self-evaluating, what is our mission, what should it be, is it something we need to update, revise, revisit, we were also hearing a lot of conversation and question around purpose in the field and in industry. A lot of discussions about people reevaluating and reassessing, who am I, what do I want, what do I desire, how do I want to organize my life? It's not that this is a new concept, it's that the pandemic really forced so many of us to reassess kind of current state and what I do in my day-to-day. It was very disruptive in a very important, meaningful way, and we had to pay attention to that for the benefit of our community and for the benefit of our board and our staff. And so we were already in this very deeply immersive period of reflection and trying to figure out, we want to serve our community and serve one another in more meaningful ways and in ways that are very much reflective of our mission, which needs to come into a new current truth, and also in a way that allows every single one of us, members of the board, every member of the staff, no matter where they are in the organization, to be able to clearly see that this is how I articulate my purpose, this is the meaning I have in my day today, and this is how it connects to the mission of the organization.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate the sense of that is a real silver lining of COVID, that for all the suffering and everything that happened, we also all had an opportunity to emerge as a better version of ourselves, and I think you folks have certainly done that, so love it. One of the things that really impressed the review committee was just how thoughtful you folks have been to building and rebuilding your board. We all know that representation is so important on a variety of levels, but in particular because lived experience around the table leads to different outcomes and ultimately different impact. Can you talk a little bit first? I know you sort of used some board survey techniques to sort of begin your process, and just a little bit more about how that informed the process and what that looked like, just the building the board itself in a bit of a different way.
I think that one of the other speakers talked about, the power of having something, the visual power of, a picture, right? And so, surveying our board and really getting that clarity on who was on our board and what kind of expertise and background they brought to the board, and seeing that in sort of color illustrations, it was very objective, and so that really was that was nice guardrails for us in thinking about our recruitment, and it really guided our conversations. And LaMonica was on our nominations committee, and we would have conversations, and one person would think, I have this great person in mind. We say, do they fit into who we need right now? And so it was like, oh yes, it was a very grounding exercise for us. And LaMonica, do you want to expand on that process?
I do. So what I so appreciated about that is because we were looking at data to help us to see the gaps. So if I can connect this back to an earlier session, the session this morning on governance culture, one of the things that really sat with me immediately is this idea that sometimes, especially when you're on a board, you have a tendency to rely on your in-group. The people you know, the people you automatically trust, the people who may have a similar background or speak the same language as you. And we wanted to disrupt that. We looked at the data to identify where are the gaps, where are the opportunities in the level of expertise we have and the knowledge, and I say those things separately, knowledge and expertise in our experience. And we were so intentional then about being able to say, and it could have been anything, that we need someone or more people with a deeper understanding of finance, or a deeper understanding of how you assess, or a different understanding of HR policy, or how you support community from a DEI lens and perspective. And so being intentional and looking at the data, respecting the data, helped us to understand where we needed to be more intentional in our recruitment.
Yeah, and I'm probably a product of that recruitment, being this is my first year. I, of all people, probably don't feel like I necessarily belong amongst all of you who are so very well connected, and it's a little intimidating sometimes to know, oh, I can ask this person. I know they're really well connected. They can get that money and whatnot, and when it comes to that development, and sometimes I feel it's a little bit scary. But what I would say is that I've seen just having reviewed before I went into the organization myself, reviewed and seen the path that they took to develop this board, and including just seeing myself here before you today. And it became diverse in multiple levels, whether you're talking ethnic, age, experience, as well as professional background, and including the recruitment of clients. Is what I've noticed from the last panel that we had here is I was just amazed to see former clients come back and bring their passion and heart back to the organization. I happen to be that product because I brought my children to this organization when I was going through quite a bit, and my children were suffering from their own mental health and behavioral challenges. And so having this organization be there at the time that they were was absolutely key, because it attracted me to the organization, it attracted my kids to the organization, and I truly believe you're going to have your greatest cheerleaders be your clients. And so I feel like that was a really key step, and I feel it's a really good best practice that I'm starting to begin to see. It's not just people that are well connected. It's not just people that are paid to be on these boards, like, I'm not going to say names, but there's banks and large corporations, right, that have somebody that they pay to be here. I'm not being paid to be here today. I'm losing money today, but nevertheless. So you know what I mean, but that's the passion that drives you here. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody that's been moving towards that trajectory.
Yeah. I think one thing that's already very clear today is if you build a different kind of board, you begin to build a different kind of organization, because those folks around the table begin to ask very different types of questions that leads to a different directionality for the organization. And I know for you folks, as you built a different kind of board and began asking different kinds of questions, you also engaged in a strategic planning process. And would love to first talk just about the process itself. I know you deeply engaged the community, both internally, staff, and board, but just as significantly external stakeholders. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, well, we started off with a really good framework that the board had put together before the pandemic. So we approached it with like, okay, we have a really good starting place. Let's approach this from a place of curiosity and listening. What has shifted over the last 2 years? What are we hearing from our staff, from our clients, from our partners, from our donors, our whole entire community? And we spent a lot of time really listening and observing, what the aftermath of the pandemic, what we were seeing in our clients who already were struggling before the pandemic, and now there were layers upon layers of new issues that they were having to contend with. Especially one example is, the children's mental health. That is something that we saw, wow, this is really an issue that we need to lean into. And that is directly a result of our strategic planning process. But the part that I felt so proud about was really the deep engagement of our staff, because they're the ones who are going to be, executing this plan, right? We didn't want it to be coming from the board and the leadership team and just handing it off. We wanted that ownership to be there. And so we really engaged staff at every level, frontline, supervisor, manager, director. And we took input from them. And then the cool thing is we actually put together work teams to build out the tactics. So these were work teams that had board members, leadership team, frontline staff, and they were coming up with the tactics together.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And to add to that, so there were a couple of things that were happening concurrently. We were thinking through our strategic plan and our strategic priorities. We were thinking through rebranding, and we were also being very focused and intentional around equity, DEI, and training related to that. Mm-hmm. And so as part of the strategic planning process, we actually had these rich, immersive training sessions where we were coming together as staff, as members of the board, having very, very deep and necessary conversations around my background experience, my social identities, how I come into this work, again, whether I'm a member of the staff or I'm a member of the board, and where I feel uncomfortable coming as my whole self. And those types of conversations aren't always a part of a strategic process. Sometimes you can just get kind of narrowly focused on kind of mission, outcomes, purpose, structure, but the meaningful conversations we had in session in some of these trainings around the self and the importance of the whole self helped connect to conversations around health, mental health, how we're prioritizing opportunities for young people in our community, for families in our community, for individuals who needed recovery support, for our unhoused population. It was just, these conversations became a natural extension to the mission, and at the same time, we were able to support each other in beautiful ways. I mean, to have a conversation with someone who says, I'm Spanish speaking, I learned Spanish, and sometimes I struggle with my English, and I don't want to be perceived as not being a professional person if I can't speak eloquently. Mm-hmm. It's like, let's talk about that, and let's make sure you are very well supported here. So we were having, against very, very important conversations that then became these wonderful, helpful, productive threads to redefining our brand and redefining some of our focus and the opportunities we were looking for.
I know we don't have a lot of time left, but Hezekiah, would you maybe like to speak just a bit about the 4 key strategic priorities that emerged out of the planning process you folks engaged in?
Sure. In the interest of time and also self-interest, I'd like to talk about 2 that are very important to me. Those are definitely going to be early childhood education. And what I like about this board and also the mission, and particularly the strategic plan, is that we're not trying to be all things to everybody all at once. We're very hyper-focused in what we're doing. We're trying to expand those services to do it better and do it better for more. And I think that's really key because that is the role and purpose of creating strategic alliances and partnerships, right? Letting those who do it really good work together so that we could provide wraparound a continuum support of services for those clients. And so that's really key. We're not duplicating anything in that process. And in that process, we talk about early childhood education, which is obviously important to me, but expanding that to go beyond just the first 5 years. My kids are now after 5, so I said I had a special interest because I'd like for them to get a little bit of support there. Because I will tell you the experience between our organization and the experience that my children have had receiving that support, although one says, okay, it's free, so that's nice, that's an incentive. But no, let me tell you, free doesn't necessarily mean that it is not quality. And this is a great example of that here. And it doesn't replace in any way, shape, or form some of the other services that are out there. But I'm saying we do emphasize and focus on quality. The second thing I want to say is one of our strategic points that we are working on as well is also mental health and behavioral support services. And not only expanding that for the existing communities, but also reaching out to new populations and other areas in the county that really would really need this. So those are 2 very critical areas, both of which are very important to me. I'd like to make sure that we start supporting those students that especially most of my students are actually beyond the age of 5 years old and do need support not only in the mental health arena, especially with regarding small group and therapeutic environments to conduct very deliberate sessions with, but also some of the other behavioral support situations that are occurring that are left out of void where our children are really struggling. And the last thing I want to just finish off, if I may, is that when we look at, the general plan is that when we do an audit and we try to ensure that there's no duplication of things, we want to make sure that we go back and ask ourselves what is at the core, what is the reason why our families are eligible for these services. And part of that is the same as any of us, as being a teacher myself. It's like when we see a kid come in, some might call that a defiant kid if he doesn't want to do the homework, or he comes in, doesn't want to step to the classroom door and is yelling, screaming. In my case, my daughter the other day tore her homework assignment the moment she walked in. But the key thing is it's not a defiant kid, it's not a bad kid. It's a kid that maybe didn't eat last night, didn't eat this morning, didn't rest. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to really focusing in on what are the really core issues at heart, and we're actually looking to tackle those more when it comes to our expansion of support for those families at home from a socioeconomic perspective.
Great, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to hear you folks speak about the important work you're doing in the community with such passion and intention and focus. And again, congratulations on the award. And thank you for doing the work that you do.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again, and congrats to Episcopal Community Services. I now have the pleasure of introducing Marisa Quiroz, who is the President and CEO of the International Community Foundation, to present our next award. Marisa?
So much fun. These conversations have been so fun. My name is Marisa Quiroz, and I am the President and CEO of ICF. And I get to present the last award. The award goes to Plant for Purpose. So in a while I'm going to call them up. But I want to share with you that The Kaleidoscope Award recognizes the efforts of Plant with Purpose to transform its governance structure to reflect its role as an international organization and be better positioned to an existential issue for its constituents, climate change. Plant with Purpose is evolving as its approach to board structure, composition, and training to bridge the international and localized nature of its work. This is allowing them to build deeper relationships between their US-based and country-based boards. So not just one board, but many boards. Furthermore, as the board has turned this challenge into an opportunity through international carbon markets that are going to pay dividends to the small farmers that they serve. So we're going to be able to hear a little bit more from the Plant with Purpose team. Please come on up.
Actually, I would like for you to introduce yourselves and your positions, because I don't think the audience has that yet.
My name is John Steele. I'm current board chair at Plant with Purpose, and I've been engaged with this organization for about 15 years.
I'm Scott Sabin. I'm the CEO, and I just celebrated 30 years on the 12th of January.
I'm Sebastian Matthews, and board director of Plant with Purpose. And we lived in San Diego before. Now we're in Syracuse, New York. Weather's not as beautiful, obviously, as you have here. I was born in India, grew up in Zambia. I don't know what my parents were thinking, but they took us to apartheid South Africa when I was a kid. So, yeah, our parents, like, what can you do, right? So anyway, I love them, and yeah. Oh, so yeah.
Thank you all for being here, and congratulations on your special recognition today. I wanted to ask, we know that over the past few years, your board has been reorganized to bridge the governance structure of the U.S. board and its international affiliates. And so more specifically, can you talk about how this change contributed to the broader changes in your board composition and approach to governance? And then how are you socializing the boards, all of them, boards, more than one, plural, to develop a common understanding of governance and then share practices?
For sure. Let me start just by giving a little bit of an overview of our structure. Plant with Purpose here in the United States is the catalyst and connector for a global partnership of legally independent but functionally interdependent organizations operating in the United States and 9 other countries, 5 in Africa, 3 in the Americas, and 1 in Asia. And each of those is locally, indigenously staffed, is governed by a local board of directors made up of local leaders and occasionally local clients. And together, we like to talk a lot about the things we've been able to accomplish. We've planted just over 53 million trees now. We've helped about 400,000 people dramatically reduce their poverty. But that's really the partnerships. People sometimes ask me, so do you go into these countries and do this? No, I've had the privilege of visiting and seeing the work, but we do a lot more around catalyzing, resourcing, and connecting.
So it is really important that our board here in the United States get this right, not only to serve the organization like the rest of you in this audience, but we have 8 other boards already in motion and another one being born in Malawi as we are sitting here. So we are really motivated to get our governance right as a model for the countries that we are working in. We have been blessed by being engaged for a long period of time with this USD Nonprofit Institute. More than a few of us have taken graduate school classes. I, over the last year, was privileged to be on a board chair consortium facilitated by Lynn Corbett from here, from the USD Nonprofit Institute. We take all of this learning and we bring it back and try to live it, breathe it, change it, modify the board through a very strong and very capable governance committee chaired by Daryl, who's sitting here in the audience, and grow the governance team and the governance systems that ultimately wound up with us being recognized, deeply appreciated recognition for this Kaleidoscope Award, knowing that we're going to take this knowledge and this learning, and we're not only going to live it to serve our board, but we're going to live it to serve 9 other boards.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Scott. I want to get more into the nitty-gritty of international governance, because I think that that's what makes the organization so unique, that you are managing so many governance structures. Can you talk about the challenges and opportunities in engaging your constituents in board governance as an international organization? And then how do you take into account cultural congruency in those spaces? And how has this impacted your overall governance structure?
Sure, Marisa, let me take that. So international boards are complex, right? And I'd understatement. And so previously I've founded and chaired boards in nonprofits in the US, in South Africa, even in Australia, and in just those 3 countries alone, right? So there's governance issues, there's fiduciary. Erin and Linda spoke about that, like big word, right? Scary word. And there's accountability, and there's even what it means to be a board member, and folk have completely different views in each of these 3 contexts. Now imagine 9 countries, right? And how do you kind of, and I have to say that of all the boards that I've chaired, this is the best board that I've ever been part of, and that's really, John is just an amazing chair. So I just want to acknowledge that. It's just phenomenal. But how do you handle it across kind of 9 countries? And what works here is what we call a covenant of partnership. And so, most of us, or many of us, come from the corporate world, right? And so we think, okay, corporate world, I'm going to come into the nonprofit because nonprofits need to learn about business, right? They need to be more business-minded and learn from the corporate world. And it's something that Christian Renard, our VP of Development, said a few days ago. She said, variation, and this is like really important for me, I think, variation is a strength. And often in corporate America, we try to eliminate variation. It's all about standardization. That makes you more efficient. But it often makes you less effective. And sometimes you need effectiveness. And so that's really where this covenant of partnership comes in, where together with our 9 country boards and the 9 country partners, together we define our shared values, we define our shared faith, we define our shared value, the way that we work together. We define the outcome together, but we leave it up to each one to figure out the best way to accomplish that. And that's really a strength. And that requires kind of bottom-up versus top-down. It requires us to be less dictatorial and hear what each of us have to say and learn from. And so I think that's a really big takeaway when you're kind of working together. And it applies whether it's an international board or whether it's in San Diego, right? So with that, let me...
Because of that diversity of context, we've put a lot of effort into working through, as a community, working through a theory of change and working through the common operating standards that we're going to use, and then the covenant of partnership that Sebastian mentions. One of the really strong currents that goes through everything is that we consider we serve to be our partners, not our projects. And so we don't even like to talk about our beneficiaries. We talk about our clients, the smallholder farmers that we work with. But that same philosophy extends to our local partner organizations and those local boards of directors. It would be easy to think of them as projects, but they're not. They're our partners. And again, as Sebastian mentions, every place we work has a different understanding, and oftentimes maybe not a super clear understanding of what it means to serve as a volunteer on a nonprofit board of directors. And let's face it, most of the people in the United States don't either. I mean, part of the reason we're here is because we're working on trying to get better at it. But that means that we approach it with humility. We're not the ones with the answers. We can provide resources. We can come alongside of, but we can also learn. And I think that's a really important role of the local board. We couldn't figure out how to operate in that context, in their national context. We don't understand the cultural nuances. We don't understand the legal nuances. And so we really need each other. I also want to share that, one of the things that we've tried to do to build the bonds between our organizations as a requirement for being on the U.S. board has been to visit the countries where we work and to get to know not all of them, but within each term you are required to visit one of our programs. Obviously the pandemic threw a wrench in that, but one of the silver linings for us was moving to Zoom and realizing that everybody can do that. So we used to have a international meeting every 2 years, and we could afford to bring about 12 delegates together and work through translation and so forth. In 2021, we had our first international partnership planning meeting and global leadership team meetings, and we were able to have 80 people participate. 5 days of 6 hours on Zoom, starting for us in San Diego, 4 a.m. each day, and working through translators and participants from 10 different countries, and board members from both sides now being able to participate for the first time. And I have to say, Friday morning when we concluded, people didn't want to leave. It was amazing. People didn't want to leave, and they're passing the computers around in each office so that we could all say goodbye and greet each other. But that has basically changed the way that we're able to interact with our international boards and the sense of partnership and camaraderie.
Yes, the joy of working across many time zones.
Yes.
I understand. I want to pivot before we leave to talk about the existential challenge that you have now centered as part of your mission, climate change. And if you could talk a little bit more about how the small farmers you work with face threats from our changing climate, the connection, and how has this prompted you to make the connection to the global carbon markets? And then how have you brought your board along in weaving their own knowledge and expertise into that process, and then really training those who need it on how to present that way?
Yeah, well, first let me talk a little bit about our clients. We serve smallholder farmers, people usually with just a few acres, oftentimes, in fact, most times, growing most of their own food. From our baseline surveys, we see that most people are eating less than 2 meals a day. In one of the control populations in the area we work, 1.1 meals per day on average over the last month. Which is pretty shocking. So we're working with some of the poorest, most vulnerable people in the world, and not insulated in any way from climate effects or impacts on the land. You think about here over the last few weeks with the rain and how much it's disrupted our lives. And you think about people living on steep hillsides, and I can think of some really specific examples a few years ago in Haiti and the Dominican Republic when rain, much like we've had, resulted in landslides that killed several thousand people in one evening. Or this spring in Haiti as people planted their crops and then the rains failed and everything they planted died. And we're talking about people with very little resilience. And so climate change has been at the front of our thinking for some time, as it's becoming more of a factor for people who depend on the regularity of the rain, and as we're planting trees that may be perfectly adapted today, but 20 years from now may not, it's becoming more and more a part of our thinking. At the same time, what we're doing, the tree planting, is actually mitigating climate change. And that has provided some interesting opportunities for us. In the past few years, we're suddenly being sought out as an organization with a long and successful track record of tree planting. And so while we haven't changed our mission, in many ways our business model is evolving. And so that has led us to recruit some different kinds of board members. Cindy Chen is a senior advisor on the circular economy for a major corporation and has done a lot of background work in carbon markets, and she came on our board and began to lead a discussion 3 years ago. The last thing we did before the pandemic was participate in a conference at SALC on soil-based carbon, and that was where I had the privilege of meeting Sebastian and brought him onto the board. So we retooled our board to be much more attuned to nature-based solutions to climate change, to carbon markets, and help guide this conversation, because it really is a new world for us.
Sure, and just to kind of build on that, speaking of the smallholder farmer, so my mom's 76 years old. She's been a widow for about 3 decades. She's got 10 acres of rubber, and she's busy farming. And she is your classic smallholder farmer. She's intercropping pineapples and vanilla with rubber, like whatever the market needs. And this applies to smallholder farmers, but also applies to the clients that you serve and work with. But they're incredibly entrepreneurial. They're risk takers because they have to be, right? They don't have 401ks, they don't have pension plans, they don't have healthcare, right? They've got to feed their kids, they've got to pay for their kids' weddings, dowries, etc. That doesn't apply in San Diego necessarily. But they've got to do a ton of things, and then as Scott said, they've got to contend with severe weather events and climate change. And so these are incredibly, and sometimes as development folk, we can forget that, right? Like we don't realize exactly how risk tolerant and aggressively so these folk are. And so, we have a moral obligation to make sure that they get the best deal. And so, whether it's apples or coffee or carbon, right? It's a byproduct from these trees, and we've got a moral obligation to make sure that these smallholder farmers have access to markets for this and get the best deal possible. And let's face it, trees are amazing, right? Like when God put trees in the Garden of Eden, he knew what he was doing, right? They just, from high school biology, trees just sit there and suck carbon, right? They're just like CO2. They're just amazing. They just breathe it in, right? And, corporate America has put on the voluntary carbon market a price of $3 per ton of carbon that each tree produces. And a single tree will sequester about a ton of carbon over its lifetime. And if and this is the big, hairy, audacious goal that Plant with Purpose is embarked on, 50 million trees in the last 30 years, and now 50 million the next 4 years, that's like $150 million. But surely it's the smallholder farmers who are doing all of the work, nurturing this, taking care of this, protecting our planet, right? It's nature-based solutions that are going to solve this problem, right? It's trees that are going to solve this. It's nature that's going to solve the problem that And so don't we have an obligation to make sure that these smallholder farmers get a share of this, because they're doing all of the work, right? And so that's really where this kind of the philosophical underpinning comes from this. And then to Scott's point, Cindy Chen, she had a Harvard master's thesis, won the Dean's Prize in terms of nature-based solutions, the circular economy, and she really pushed the organization, pushed the board. She's on our board. It's just amazing. She's based in Houston. And as a result, thanks to John's encouragement, the board went with this. We had a board retreat in May, and the board allocated an extra $100,000 to study this. There's our first project in the Dominican Republic, funded by One Tree Planted, and working with Taking Root, and the Arbor Day Foundation, and working with Taking Root, a Canadian organization. Yay, Canada, yeah. And we're starting with 300,000 trees, and then another 250,000 trees after that, and really testing the carbon markets and making sure that we get this right, that our smallholder farmers get the best deal possible, that it aligns with their livelihoods, and so that they're protected, that their interests are served. And so the takeaway of all of this for me is that boards can do an incredibly important role in piloting new initiatives. That initiatives don't just have to come up from the organization. The board just kind of rubber stamps that. But actually the boards have a great role in kind of pushing the boundaries, trying new things, piloting things. It doesn't have to be this kind of big bang, but we can absolutely play that key role. And so that, for me, is a great example of where boards can play that key role in pushing the boundaries.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, for helping us to highlight the resiliency of small-scale farmers and seeing them as early adopters for climate action. I think that's great. And thank you, Scott and John, for sharing your story. I could go on. I have so many questions. I want to know about land use policy and agricultural land, and if we could do what we have done with conservation in the environmental movement with small-scale farmland. So maybe I will meet you outside after this to talk more about that. And I invite everybody to do that. I think our award winners for the Kaleidoscope Awards will be outside, out front. But thank you all for staying for this awesome conversation, and congratulations.
Thank you.